All right, we're going to start chapter 10, Making Agriculture Sustainable. So before we get too far into it, there are pieces of information that are not in your book that have occurred on the AP test, and that includes a list of the top agricultural products in the world, which include sugarcane, maize, wheat, rice, potatoes. The top crops in the US we have are corn, soybeans, wheat, and cotton. Some regional crops are seen in Europe are winter wheat, rye, and barley. Asia is a large rice producer, mainly due to the fact that we have such a strong monsoon season, so the fields will actually flood, which is perfect for rice. North America grows a majority of the corn and wheat. Africa is mainly corn and sugarcane, and Central and South America are large producers of corn and wheat. So make sure you know the definition of food security: undernourished, overnourished, malnourished, and then we've got actually two different types of malnourishment. So overnutrition is actually new. It's happening in the US with our obesity rates and issues. Non-nutrition is when you actually do eat food, but you're not getting the specific nutrients or vitamins that you might actually need. The kwashiorkor and the other types of malnutrition. And we're going to actually add scurvy into the list, which is a lack of vitamin C that causes swollen gums and loose teeth. So those are actually highlighted more in here in the malnutrition. So next we got the Green Revolution, which started in the 1940s. It has nothing to do with eco-friendly. It's just dealing with the fact that we are growing more food. So there was an increase after World War II in agricultural industry, utilizing more fossil fuels and synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. Haber-Bosch method was actually used to make synthetic fertilizers and nitrogen. And synthetic pesticides came around through the use of petroleum oil and other chemicals during this time. So we learned also about water irrigation, and had we known that we could actually pump water out of the ground and sprinkle it, probably wouldn't have gotten into the Dust Bowl, but we didn't know that during that time. Some positives: save the country from starvation, reduce poverty, we grew more food on the same acre of land, which increased profits. We didn't need new land for farming, so the land that we did have was saved, and habitats were preserved and protected as old farmland was actually utilized. Some negatives are that water pollution from fertilizer, pesticides also caused eutrophication and cancers. Loss of biodiversity of crops and livestock equals less nutrition because of the lack of variety. And then increase in air pollution from tractors and nitrates being sprayed as fertilizers. So we should know what monoculture is and the drawbacks of it. So being more susceptible to pests and bugs and other problems is one big thing that arises. The modern green revolution includes genetically modified crops, which make tastier food, higher yields, drought and pest resistance. We're also looking at more food, we're also looking at more food radiation, which actually is basically another part of the green revolution, where we're zapping food with radiation to actually kill pathogens off. So again, mechanisms of farming were used more with the revolution to increase profits, but unfortunately it also increases the reliance on fossil fuels. So eating more meat actually affects the environment more, because you actually lose 90% of the energy in the plants as they're fed to animals, and therefore we need on average 10 times more land, pesticides, fertilizers, and fossil fuels to actually grow the same amount of calories of meat versus if we just ate plants. So if we grow grain and instead of turning it into crackers, we feed it to a cow, then slaughter the cow for a burger, we actually have now lost 90% of the wheat's energy to the consumption of the cow. So remember, this isn't just veggies, but grain as well. Livestock pollute the air with methane, nitric oxide, and CO2, which all contribute to the climate change. The figures show you the loss of product that is actually created. So the cow is not 90%, it's actually 95% of a loss, which is way worse. So a little bit less for pork, and then chicken. So if you want to be eco-friendly, choose to eat less meat, or choose an animal that is more eco-friendly, like chickens. So again, free-range meat tends to be antibiotic-free. It's usually grass-fed. Animals' waste is used then as a fertilizer, so it's organic fertilizer. It needs a lot of land, which unfortunately is a drawback. And then it's also a drawback is that it's more expensive meat if you're paying for it. CAFOs are concentrated animal feeding operations. These are like, feed lots. So quickly get livestock ready for slaughter. They're crowded. Animals are fed grains and lots of waste contaminants. Ground contaminates the ground and water. It's usually less expensive types of food as well. So livestock, again, pollutes the air. And we start to see the fact that air pollution with smell and nitrous oxide. We see greenhouse gases like methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide. So surface and groundwater pollution with nitrogen and phosphorus and bacteria and viruses. A few years back, there was actually people who died from an E. coli contamination that resulted from manure on a feedlot that was running into a spinach field and getting them sick. And then crowded animal areas leads to the overuse of antibiotics, and resistance increases due to that. So we also are taking in trace amounts of those antibiotics as well. So again, this just shows you how much land is required to produce 1 kilogram of each of these meats, how much water is required, and then how much greenhouse gases are produced. So chickens, again, are the most efficient. Here's a picture of those feedlots we were just talking about. And then we get into aquaculture. So aquaculture has positives, which include the fact that it's very efficient with small amounts of water and fuel. Negatives are that we can actually contaminate wastewater, and fish can escape and compete with wild fish. And the density of fish, being so many fish in a small area, increases the chance for disease. And that disease could transfer to the wild populations that are out and about if anything gets out. So